For this GE on November 19, a lot of people ask me who they should vote for because they think all parties are the same. And so I want to try and break it down for you to help differentiate each of them a little bit. Now, first thing you need to understand, this election, you really only need to know 3 of the main coalitions. The first is Barisan Nasional, or BN, whose Prime Minister candidate is Ismail Sabri, although there have been multiple reports that its president, Zahid Hamidi, who is currently facing multiple allegations of corruption, is trying to become the next Prime Minister if they win. Second is Pakatan Nasional, or PN, whose Prime Minister candidate is Muhyiddin Yassin, who first was elected under the Pakatan Harapan banner in GE14, but later betrayed them in what is now known as the Sheraton move and became the whole reason BN was able to come back into power in the first place. Third and last is Pakatan Harapan, whose Prime Minister candidate Anwar Ibrahim has been blamed for Pakatan's 22 months of failure, despite the fact that he wasn't even the Prime Minister while Pakatan Harapan was in power. Now, to be fair to the people who think all parties are the same, they're not entirely wrong, because if you're talking about both BN and PN, they are almost quite literally the same thing. They've been part of the same government for over the last 2.5 years. While Muhyiddin was the Prime Minister from PN, he elected BN politicians to become cabinet ministers, and when Ismail Sabri was the Prime Minister from BN, he appointed PN politicians as ministers. Most of Bersatu are just people who jumped from UMNO, and PAS has talked about working with UMNO from even before the last general election. So for your ease of understanding, we're just gonna put BN and PN on one side and Pakatan Harapan on the other side for the sake of this video. Now, when people say both these sides are the same, it tells me one of 2 things. One, they're either misinformed or don't know enough, which I don't blame them. The only reason I keep up with Malaysian politics is because I'm dead inside. Or 2, they're straight up lying. For example, when they say both sides are the same because they both didn't keep their promises, just think about that for a sec. Only one side has been in power for most of the 60+ years that Malaysia has ever existed, while the other side has only ever been in power for less than 2 years, which is less time than BN and PN have been in power together. To say they both didn't keep their promises is like you sitting for an exam that was supposed to be an hour long, but half an hour into it, the teacher takes your paper saying you suck because you didn't answer all the questions on the paper. Or another reason they say both sides are the same is because both have court cases that they drop for their own politicians when, like, just look at the cases. This is a poster shared by a member of UMNO's own Supreme Council showing the cases that were dropped involving politicians from Pakatan Harapan, and notice, almost all of them had to do with the Sedition Act, the Peaceful Assembly Act, the Sedition Act, which were acts Pakatan Harapan had promised to abolish for infringing upon people's rights to free speech and assembly. Meanwhile, almost all the cases dropped against BN politicians while BN and PN have been in power together over the last couple of years have all had to do with corruption, bribery, money laundering, corruption, involving money that was allegedly stolen from the people or taken for personal gain. So really, there is no way you can say both sides are just the same, especially if you consider of both sides, only one side has the worst attendance in parliament, which is, you know, the main thing they're meant to do as members of parliament, while the other side is made up of MPs who consistently show up to work. Of both sides, only one side was responsible for the Sheraton move that resulted in all of the political instability over the last couple of years, until one man decided it was a good idea to hold this year's election in the middle of the flooding season. Of both sides, only one side is made up of a former president who's currently in prison for corruption, as well as the politicians who defended him for years. Meanwhile, the other side is made up of the very people who've been charged and punished for exposing the truth about him. So no, both sides are not the same, and if you're still wondering who to vote for, I'm just here to tell you it all depends on your values. If it's important to you to have leaders who are all about defending Malays and defending Islam, then just vote for either BN or PN. Again, there's literally no difference. If you don't know who to vote for, just flip a coin or something. But if you're tired of the corruption, if you're tired of the racism, of the extremism, of the double standards, of the indifference, of the incompetence, and instead you want change towards a fairer, more democratic, more progressive Malaysia, then your best hope for that is by voting for Pakatan Harapan in GE15, because anyone who says both sides are just the same have either been lied to or are lying to you.